So when I was a kid, there was nothing I wanted more than a t-shirt with a cardinal. You might think, well, it's not a big deal. You know, you get plenty of them anywhere. You probably have 100 of them sitting at your house. But for us, growing up, that was a huge deal. Anybody else huge deal growing up? Okay. So we could never find, you can't go to the store, you can't go, there was no internet at that time. So it was like, if we were lucky, during another camp, there might be a place to buy a shirt, or certain camps that you went to had a shirt. And so that was like our prized possession, have a shirt with a cardinal on it. And so, and now, you all are very lucky that you can at any moment in time go online and you can find any type of a shirt that you want. Not only can you find shirts with cardinals on it, but you can pretty much get anything you want with a cardinal on it, from shirts to jeans to water bottles to anything. So yes, so every type of thing that you imagine. So there was a time, maybe about 5 years ago. So our older daughter was 2 years old, and I wanted to buy her a t-shirt. And so I said, all right, let me see what kind of children's sick t-shirts are out there. And so I found this one website that will remain nameless that sold t-shirts. And I wanted to find something that was in girl sizes, kid sizes. What could I find that was a good sick t-shirt? And I saw some really cool stuff. I saw the Courageous t-shirt. I saw the Proud by Birth, Sick by Choice. Really cool, creative, innovative shirts, really pretty handwriting, beautiful colors. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I have lots of selections, lots of choices, way better than the options I had when I was a kid. But then I thought to myself, I want something different. I want something, we were going to, it was close to June, and we were going to a rally, and I said, I'm trying to look for something authentic, beyond just a conduct. What other types of t-shirts are out there? And I saw this section on the website that had a label on it that said 1984. I was like, that's where I want to go. That's the t-shirt section that I want to go to. So I clicked on 1984, and it was darkness. It was like a cloud had come over my computer, and it was just thunder and lightning. Because all I saw was shirts like this. It was the fiery cardinal with the ball back in the center. It was all dark black writing, the Collarstone bloody barbed wire picture. It was the fiery 84. There was about, I'd say half the shirts were the fiery 84 ones. Fiery 84s, guns, and bloody guns. And I said, this is my option. This is what I have to choose from when I'm looking for 1984. And I wondered, what in the world just happened? What just happened that I went to this one page, and it had all these beautiful, nicely, thoughtful, creative designs. And the moment I went into 1984, it was hellfire, blood, and just demolition. And so I reflected for a minute. I said, why is it? Why is it that we have this certain way of looking at the events of 1984? And perhaps there is a good reason for it. As we all know, as we all heard yesterday, there's a series of tragic events that took place. Wounds have not fully healed. Many of us, many of our parents, grandparents were directly impacted one way or another, and the wounds and the emotions and the expressions that we have not fully healed. Psychologists will tell us that not only have we experienced trauma individually, but as a community we've experienced trauma, and have not really fully gone past it. We've repressed our feelings all these years. Even though 30 years have passed, we've not taken the opportunity to deal with those, to express our emotions. And so it's coming out in these ways in which we have it right now, in the slide that I showed you earlier. And let's face it, I get it. I kind of, and of course, we need to collect. And perhaps this is what we need to do, what we should have been doing for the last 30 years, is collecting, commiserating, sharing our stories, kind of like we've been doing today. So I get it. I get exactly how we got here. I understand why we spent the last 30 years the way we have in trying to reflect the way we have, and it has expressed itself through t-shirts, through images, through posters of blood and fire in 1984 with flames coming out. I have plenty of those types of t-shirts sitting at home as well. But I think it comes at a price. And what I mean by that is, here we are in a very unique situation. I looked up the definition prior to putting this presentation together on what exactly a generation means. What is the definition of a generation? And one of the definitions I saw was it is the time where a child is born to the time that that child loses their own offspring. And in average terms, in North America, it's 30 years. So we can officially say that this year, we are introducing 1984 to a brand new generation. And this is different than the generation that we were part of in the sense that the people born today, the children in the other room, they were not born during 1984, they are not directly impacted by 1984 directly. And they've grown up, and they're going to grow up with parents who lived in an environment where the events of 1984 were largely suppressed as a majority. And from my own experience, over the last 30 years, I was thinking to myself, I did my very first presentation on 1984 when I was 18 years old, a freshman in college, and I got my hands on these slides, my roommate and I, the slides that we saw yesterday, actually. At that point, not many people had seen them, a handful of copies that were out there. We got a copy of those slides and we started doing a presentation. And I remember at that time, in 1994, when we started doing these presentations, it would be a room like this, except you could barely find a space to stand. The rooms would be crowded, they would be full, there would be people standing in the back, people are squeezing in, looking through the windows. It was like everybody really wanted to listen to this. Everybody wanted to hear anything they could hear, anything they could learn about this event in history. And there was just this burning desire to know more about what happened during the anybody remember a time period like that? A little bit? Okay. Yeah. And so I've been doing presentations for 20 years, and I've noticed a trend of that interest becoming less and less. Rooms get smaller, people show up a little bit later, they leave a little earlier, the crowds get smaller, and to the point where I remember about 7-8 years ago, I was making presentations at different universities across Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And whatever university I went to, it'd be the same group of kids that went to every one. And then the very last presentation I did at the University of Maryland, nobody showed up. And you might think to yourself, well, maybe it's you. And maybe it is me. I don't know. Maybe it's just my presentation skills. But I talked to other people who make similar presentations and who teach these sorts of things at the Tulsa schools. And they told me that they've had the same experience. And it's not that, and the part that I think is most concerning, that the crowds thin down when it comes to topics of 1984. It's the opposite ends of the spectrum. You have this handful of people who will never want to be interested in discussing this. You probably know that. They're never going to be interested in talking about 1984. And then you have the people who are always interested. They couldn't really care about anything else. Both those sides are fine. What worries me is that 85% that sits in the middle who just couldn't care less. The indifference. And I worry about the indifference of the movement, because I think it's that indifference that may risk the story of 1984 being lost forever. So my question to you is, why does it matter? So you all made a choice. You could have done many other things over your Memorial Day weekend. I'm sure you had a lot of other options. It's a beautiful weekend, but you chose to come here to be with your son. But you knew specifically that the topic of this retreat was going to be 1984. Why is it important that we remember? You sat and you listened to Paul's uncle's presentation about his account. You listened to Paisap's account, and you were all so attentive to what was being heard. You have this interest. Why does it matter? Why is it important that we remember 1984 at the end of Tell me what you think. No right or wrong answer here. This is your opinion.
Well, I think as humans, we we seek out fairness and justice. It's just human nature. Everybody wants to live in a fair and just world. And as a community, we haven't had that for 1984. There is no closure.
Closure. Okay, that's a good one. So we would try to remember for closure. Okay. I like that.
How to move forward from these
That's excellent. We talk about it, we talk about the facts, we talk about the events, but there's no way to move forward. What do we do now? So it's that part. So it's that unhealed wound, as we said, that keeps us coming back. Okay? Excellent. Very good.
More than including the wound, it's when you said that there's like 10% people who don't care. An important aspect is that there's a lot of myth around there. If we haven't been directly affected by it, we want to know what actually happened, like Paisa told us. When you sit down with a group of people, they can bluntly tell you, hey, you know, he was a terrorist, so shut up. When you have the facts, you can stand in front of 100 people and say those Paisa, we were all listening to him. We all agreed, no one stood up and said, hey Paisa, maybe you're wrong. It's the way when you start saying it, that you can convert those indifferent or people who don't care to understand that yes, it happened. Since you didn't see it, doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Okay. So why is it, so these are good examples of why it's important you remember. Why is it important we as a community remember?
Make sure it doesn't happen again.
Make sure it doesn't happen again. Excellent. Okay.
to value the sacrifice and so much torture, slavery, what has gone so that we have this freedom to survive.
Very nice. Well said. That we value the sacrifices and we have this freedom to survive. Excellent. Very good. Thank you.
Because these are relevant to everybody who lives here today. Because these events were targeted to the whole Sikh community, and if we do not remember these events, we can expect the same kind of genocide again.
And we brought this up earlier today about history repeating itself. It's happened before.
Yeah.
And there are parts of history that we've experienced that we don't want to experience.
We have a better to handle.
In addition to sort of going along with the justice thing, in addition to just justice for what happened, there's also the fact that the environment is still, as far as I know, hearing the situation is still the same where you can't, the police is basically terrorizing the public, corruption, whether it be a job or another.
Yep, it's like the point you raised yesterday, that really nothing has changed legally, justice, precedent, case law, there's no environment set up that would prevent such a thing from happening.
I think it's important to remember that the issues that are occurring in the job right now, from suicides, economic downfall, as well as the issues that plague our clock are directly related to things that happened before. Yeah.
Excellent. These are all excellent points.
I think it's just important for future generations to know.
Why?
Well, because this is an important part of our history.
Why?
Why? I mean, it's, we had, this is the biggest, genocide against our community. I mean, it is our Holocaust. You take the Jews and, it happened, so many years ago, and Jews that are born today, the generation now, they know about the Holocaust. They're taught about it.
And what does it mean for them? What does it mean for Jews when they learn about the Holocaust?
Well, they realize that it's it's a significant part of their history, and that it was an event that majorly impacted the society.
I'm just going to add to that, I think that Jews find a source of strength from it, and that we should also find strength from what happened and instill that in our children.
Interesting. Very good.
I think that
Because we don't want to learn about this, we don't want to take the time, we just continue to go through this cyclessly. And that was an earlier point I repeated earlier, is that about it being a source of strength, as we see for many issues.
Well, so that it never happens again. They're educated, they've got goals and plans in place so that it just never happens again.
I'm just going to add that when we think about historic moments in history, we were to make a whole list. It's because we've got the programs and whatever the march is, but this is something that happened within a very recent period, and that was a reason for me to have this, that when I think of recent history.
I don't really know what it is. I'm learning a lot.
Good.
I'm not the added this week. I mean, there were things that we wanted to do without that. And giving more reasons to that something that just not us really right now. Like, and then we do all those things. We still have those goals. And we have not had those.
Excellent points, a great, very thoughtful point.
I think bring yourself to knowledge is that if you go talk to a lot of people in villages, a lot of them never even heard of numbers and institutions. Talking about this type of things and arming yourself with this knowledge and manufacturing is one way of layering and mobilizing.
Work to remember is just to not forget, and then our results, like you said, with our local community, and also one other thing, what happens. This is the first time I learned about it. It's like it's a very underrepresented event just in the course of human history.
Well said, excellent points. I think you really covered a lot of the points that I wanted to cover here. Sometimes I ask this question, and there are many who would say we shouldn't remember. We need to move on as a community. I can't tell you how many times I've been in rooms where I'm attacked from all sides with this idea of why do you keep bringing these issues up? You guys know. We need to move on as a community. We need to let go. Look how many successes we have in other areas. Why don't you focus on that? Why are you focusing on the same time period? And I've thought about all those things. And there's some truth to what they're saying. I don't agree, but there's some truth to what they're saying. And that's going to kind of lead into these next slides. So why is it important to remember? I think you all hit most of those points. There's that saying, those who forget their history are doomed to repeat it. And I think, again, Uncle G covered that this morning. You all covered this as well. That we have repeated our history more than once. And if we look at the environment and even what's going on in India, it is eerily familiar with what we've seen prior to 1984 with the environment that we have right now. Secondly is, I've noticed that we obviously, as a comment that was brought up earlier here, that we as Sikhs struggle to have any real political voice. We are expecting the Indians to represent us. We are expecting the Volleyball to represent us. We're expecting the SGPC to represent us, but none of them really represent us in the way that we need to be represented. We lack this political voice, and we can't figure out why. But I believe that people who really understand the events of 1984, if you really understand the events of what happened from 85 to 95, then you'll understand why these institutions don't support us. Then you'll understand why we need to create some other way of communicating our desires, our needs, our principles to the world. And it's not going to be through the current processes. So if we expect to have any geopolitical presence as Sikhs, as an independent people or voice, a lot of that knowledge, a lot of that voice is really going to come from these events that happened before. That's what's really going to arm us with the knowledge to be able to have these conversations. But I would say the most important reason why it's important to remember, this is a point that was brought up, is that strength, is that inspiration. And you might ask yourself, what do you mean inspiration? How can we look at these tragic events where thousands of people died and take inspiration? I'll give you some of my examples of why I'm inspired. What you don't know, what you don't hear about, you hear about all the atrocities that were committed after the pogroms. You hear about many of the people who removed their identity because they did not want to be killed in the streets. What you don't hear too much about is this short spike, this short increase of people who didn't know how else to respond to this, but make it to their group and take Amrit during that time in 1984, 1985. Anybody know anybody in their family or somebody who took Amrit around that time, shortly after 1984? A good quarter of the people here, I know my father did as well. That was the way they responded. They didn't know how else to show their solidarity, but through showing their solidarity through their love for the group. And I think this is something that goes unnoticed. I can't tell you how many times I run into people who tell me that they made their commitment to the movement right after '84, and it's one of the most inspiring things that I do. What we also don't hear too much about, enough about, in my opinion, is the personalities. And we spent some time talking about it this weekend. This could fill up with a much bigger slide. I mentioned this once in Colorado. We talked about All Singh, General Singh. All of these are people who gave up a lot and put their, whether you agree with some of their points or not, they put their lives on the line for the bunk. They displayed immense courage and they gave their lives for it. They paid the ultimate price. And that is why Sub said that we should be working towards doing those things out. So there's amazing stories of personality, of courage, amazing stories of bravery that came out of 1984. Another thing is, and this is just a subtle point that I've noticed, is that if I look at some of the major organizations that we have in the US, organizations of leadership, I think I've had conversations with pretty much most of the founders of these organizations, and pretty much every single one of them has had some deep connection to the events of 1984. And I don't think that's by chance. I think that is not a mistake. That it just so happens that all these organizations that do work for the fund, that help advance the fund forward, all have had some connection, whether it's through their founders, some board members, their advisory board members who had deep connections to 1984 and have continued that connection on in moving the fund forward. And then there's the idea of public unity. Now, I'm not one to talk much about public unity. I believe Six have accomplished a lot without public unity. But at the same time, I remember that there was this time period shortly after 1984 where there was that sense of unity, where there was, everybody was in agreement that what happened was wrong and that we needed to do something and that this was not right for the Six, that Six needed something more, our rights were not being protected. I remember going to marches as a kid, 8, 9 years old, and seeing hundreds of thousands of people behind me. I remember going to the Gurmat and seeing nothing but a sea of gay and got it for 15, 20 minutes of everybody standing up, that we needed to do something. We needed to stand in solidarity. Now granted, that was a very short time frame, but for me personally, it helped me know that it can happen, that it's possible. And whether it was the recent Rajwana movement or the Gurmat movement, all of those have been sort of glimpses of what I saw immediately after 1984 as a kid. And most importantly for me is the stories of courage. When the Rubin and Sarup, our daughters, when we talked to them about 1984, we have a choice in how we tell the story. And when we tell the story, it's not that at their age, we don't spend as much time talking about the massacre. We talk about the 70-odd soldiers who held the might of one of the strongest armies in the world for a period of 3 days. We talk about how little they had, about their food rations, their weapons, as it was depleting, no matter what. Throughout those 3 days, they held the might of the Indian Army. And they took out hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers on the way out. Yes, the people who were killed that day were innocent victims who were killed. But these 70-odd soldiers, they were ready. And they were prepared to defend the north side. And they were ready to fight. And they were soldiers. And this is the way. These stories of courage, these stories of bravery, are the way that we tell our kids the story of 1984. So my point in all this is saying is that 1984 can be inspiring. But we just need to frame it in the right way. We need to engage a new generation of Sikhs. We are now upon, as I said earlier, engaging with a generation of Sikhs that know nothing about 1984. When I ask younger kids at the Khalsa school about 1984, the Varsab attack, no bells are going off. They have no idea what I'm talking about. And so we have a chance to now create the story. We have now a chance to engage them in a different way. Now let me tell you, it's not going to happen through blood and fire, and it's not going to happen with this idea of us being the victim. And this is important. This is very important, because if you look at just basic psychology, if you look at basic marketing, if there's people who know nothing about these events, and all you're going to approach it with is death and violence, they're not going to attach themselves to the story long term. We need to think of something. 1984 needs a new paradigm. We need a new lens to view 1984, and we're not going to wait for anybody else to create it. Nobody in the last 30 years has made an effort to create a new way, a new lens to view 1984. It's up for us to craft the story. 1984, in my opinion, needs to be rewritten. So I don't have all the answers to this. But I know you might be asking yourself, what are you talking about? Again, how can you take these tragic events and turn it into something positive? You know, that's blasphemous. You know, this is such a tragic time for us. How can you turn it into something that people will think about highly, or think about proudly, or celebrate? But the fact is, I'm not looking this up. When we talk about Baba Deep Singh, when we talk about Shaheed Baba Deep Singh, what is the first image that comes to your mind? When you think about his last days, what thoughts come to your mind? Is it the thousands of people that died alongside him in the Battle of the Afghans? Is it the Barsab that was destroyed shortly before his passing? Or is it something else? What is that first image of Baba Deep Singh that comes to your mind? Right? This is what we remember of Baba Deep Singh. Whether you look at it literally, or whether you look at it figuratively, or whether you look at it metaphorically, that he fought so bravely, that even terribly injured, he fought to his last breath. This is what you remember of Baba Deep Singh. How many of you take inspiration from Baba Deep Singh? About 2 weeks ago, we asked the group, our elder daughter, she's 7 years old, and we said, somehow we got into a discussion about role models. And we said, who is your role model? And she said, the Chote Sahib. And of course she would say that. He'd been drilling this in her head for 7 years. And the fact of the matter is, you ask any of those kids out there who their role models is, and I'll bet you they'll say the Chote Sahib as well. But it made me think, you know, what a tragic story. What a tragic story that this 7 and 9-year-old are bricked alive and suffocated to death. But a 7-year-old says that they are all my role models. I want to be like them. Why is that? Why is that? It's the way we told the story. It's the way we read it. We've taken these events and we've made it something to be proud of. I ask of you that we need to do the same thing. So, how do we do this? I have a few ideas, but I don't have any answers. We're going to do an activity to come up with some answers in a few minutes. But I have some ideas to start you off. First thing is terminology. First of all, when I say terminology, in our home, we never call it Operation Blue Star. We call it the Battle of Owens, of the First Indo-Sikh War. And we use those words purposely, because Blue Star is the name that the government gave. Battle of Amritsar is the name that we gave as the month. That's what it was. And once you change that terminology, the whole paradigm, the whole lens in which you view the event is completely different. Now we can talk about those stories in courage. Now we can talk about those stories in bravery. And this is the way in which we turn it. Second is focusing on issues and not personalities. And this is more relevant, maybe not as much for kids, but when I have dialogues with people, I notice 90% of the time when folks argue with me about 1984, why are you talking about this? We shouldn't be speaking about this, blah, blah, blah. 99% of the time, it's about Baba Nelson. This is where they have issues with. They didn't like his personality. They don't like something he said. They believe in a lot of the myths that were brought up yesterday. So my argument is, even if we take Baba Nelson out of the picture, now tell me your argument. Explain to me 1947 to 1984. Explain to me the disappearances. Explain to me why promises were not kept. Explain to me 3,000, 20,000, 25,000 illegal cremations. Now we're starting to have a discussion. I don't need to convince them about Baba Nelson. That doesn't matter to me. What I need to convince them is on the issues. I can believe and feel about Baba Nelson the way I want to, but I don't need to defend him or prove him to anybody else. But once you take these certain individuals or personalities out of the picture, now you can have a debate. And those debates are pretty straightforward in my opinion. And another piece of this is when we focus on, we can take inspiration from personalities, but if the whole movement becomes about personalities, they become short-lived. And I would argue, look at the case with Gurmat, look at the case with Rubin. As soon as the circumstances changed, the movement died out. So if we really expect the story of 1984 and remembrance of 1984 to really continue, take inspiration and courage from the personalities, but don't make the entire movement about personalities, because that really wasn't the case. Okay? And then the other point that I wanted to bring out here is that I think you see me bring this up more than once, is to present positive, engaging, and inspiring images. So how do we change the story? How do we change the lens? Here are a few ideas. We change our terminology. We focus on the issues and not the personalities. And we present positive, engaging, inspiring images and positive, engaging, and inspiring words. Like the shirt. So, we're going to do an activity. We're going to split into 4 groups. I'm not going to count you off. You're going to voluntarily go to a group that you want to go to. And I'm hoping this works. I've never done this before. So, if it works, this could really be of value to everybody in the room. It's something you can take with you outside and use this throughout this year and beyond. So I hope it does work. What I'm going to ask is that in a second, you're going to go to 4 sections of the room, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you're going to do an activity, but I want you to think of yourself. What is the skill I have? And see which one of these categories you might fit. Are you a writer? Are you an artist? Are you a storyteller? Or are you a singer or a poet? Now, you don't have to be excellent at any one of these things. But I'm saying, if you don't feel you're any, think to yourself, if I had to lean on one of these or the other, pick one. And stick with that. And each group is going to do an activity using some of that skill. Don't worry, you're not going to all have to sing or all have to paint something. But we're going to do a short activity. I want you to think about which one of these things that are most likely your skill. And I want you to go to that section. You're going to go there now, and then I'm going to tell you what your activity is. So why don't we slowly, quietly get up. Writers over here, artists. And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Group 1. Now, before you read into this too much, I want you to think first about everything that you have learned up to this point. Think about the presentation think about the play that we saw for those of us who were here Friday night. Think about the account that Paul's uncle gave us. Think about the presentation on the myths and truths and facts about all Olivia Nelson. Think about the presentation on the Anand-Prasad resolution. Think about the human rights violations in the period of 1985 to 1995. Think about Jaswant Singh Kabul. Think about the presentation that Michael Piotr gave us last night and this morning, as well as Bob Marty. Think about everything that you've learned up to this point over the last couple of days, and see if you can incorporate some of those things into your activity. So group 1, writers. So you are in charge of making a speech for an upcoming Eid al-Adha in remembrance of 1984. But this is not just going to be a plain announcement that you give. You're going to put together a 1 to 2 minute speech to announce this event at the Gurmat. But I want you to think of what we just spoke about in the way we grant 1984. And so think about those concepts as you come up with this speech. And one of you or 2 of you, or however many of you, will present this back to you. And so really try to be creative, try to be innovative here, and use the principles that we just talked about, as well as other things that you've learned this weekend. Group 2, you are responsible for creating a flyer for this upcoming Youth of the Law. And you're going to create a 1-page flyer. I think we're going to use actually this flip chart right here. And I want you to put images and text in it. The text, again, should, in short, very short, phrases, a phrase or 2, communicate what this event is about, but also try to come up with an image, a logo, something, perhaps something metaphorical that conveys how we should reflect on 1980. Again, you can ask questions if you want once we break off. The third group, now these are not easy. If these are easy, then we're doing something wrong. I want these to be a little challenging. The third group, these are the storytellers, right? You're going to write a children's story about the events of 1984. Not a whole book, not a whole chapter. At least do one passage of a story describing an event of 1984 for a target audience of ages 5 years old to 8 years old. Whatever topic you want, on anything that we've talked about, but something that would be appropriate for a child aged 5 to 8. And the singers, you are going to come up with a lullaby in Punjabi or English about the event, or Spanish, about the events of 1984 for a target audience of ages 5 to 8. Again, keeping in mind all the principles that we talked about. Let's get started. If you have questions, just raise your hand and I'll come. And we're going to give you about 15 to 20 minutes. We're going to have the speech writers. We're going to have the announcement and they're going to go first. So if I can have one or however many representatives of that group will do the speech. So, again, just a reminder, this group was in charge of making a speech for an upcoming Kirtan Divar in remembrance of 1984. They were to write a 1 to 2 minute speech to announce the event of the Gurmat. All right, who's going to do it? Let's all quiet down. First of all, I want to say thank you. The first thing I ask is that you put some effort and take this seriously, and you all did that, and that makes me happy. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys came up with. Turn it over.
It's split up in 6 papers. Why could you go Let's talk about a time in Sikh history where Sikhs defiantly showed their bravery against their oppressors. A time where a handful of Sikhs stood up against the rulers at the time, and for days staved off forces 100 times their size. A time where the awesome Sikh spirit of bravery, courage, devotion, and defiance was on full display. This is not about the battle of Jamkua, not the Chobakar battle, not the Barkar battle, but about the Battle of Amritsar in 1984. In this battle, brave Sikhs came from all over Punjab to exercise their sovereignty by those who challenged their freedom, their guru, and their very existence. The tyrants attacked the Sikhs in a ferocious manner, but the brave Sikh soldiers, charged with the love of their guru and duty to their panth, fought against the forces with a resilience and perseverance unparalleled by any other. Let's all celebrate the Sikh spirit on June 3rd, 2014 at the Singh Singh Hall. Why did you go?
Awesome job, very good. And I appreciate that it wasn't easy for 15 people to come up with that. That was excellent, great job.
Well, when we got into Paul in his corner, he did his thing.
So group 2. So you are responsible for creating a flyer for an upcoming Kirtan Divar in remembrance of 1984. Please create a 1-page flyer with images and or text, or text if you want to. The images should contain a logo, perhaps a metaphor of 1984. Hand it over to the artist.
Don't pay attention to the phone.
Okay, so we went with a pretty simple concept. Basically, we have the sun rising behind the horizon. We want to be very positive about what we should take away from our remembrance of 1984. So we've got the 1984 as the focal point here with the shadow of the current year in which we should move forward with this remembrance. And basically the text down here basically would say, join us in celebrating the Jardi Kala and Qurbani of those who defended the Gurdwaras during the genocide in 1984. Come find inspiration and be the light to dispel the darkness. And then, of course, the details of the program.
And right here could be like, instead of something like that, I mean, you could have like a very short and condensed version of the Singh like speech or something, you know, like in the background, so it wouldn't look like
And I do want to add, even though it's not very visible here, there is a small khanda within the sun, so we still got the fire to kind of.
Excellent. We're going to go with the storytellers next. And again, I learned my lesson. It's not easy for 18, 20-year-olds to write children's stories. Good thing you had mothers and fathers in group too.
They decapitated their head.
So again, the exercise here was to write a passage of a children's story about the events of '84, describing the events, target audience ages 5 to 8.
So we titled the book, The Battle of Amritsar. Okay. 30 years ago, in the early morning hours during Amrit Vela, many Sikhs were gathered to celebrate the Shahidi Gurmat of our 5th Guru, Guru Arjan Dev Ji at Harmandir Sahib. During Amrit Vela, there were lots of activities going on at Harmandir Sahib. Some Sikhs had begun their nitnem, while others were listening to Asadivar. There are even some Sikhs bathing in the Sarovar. Many of these Sikhs are even children, and these children were helping their parents do seva. As Kirtan filled the air, everyone was in Jardikala. Suddenly, gunshots were heard firing through the air. What did the brave Sikhs decide to do? The Vaisavs continued to do Asadivar despite the chaos. The courageous Sangat went out to defend the Darbar Sahib, while others herded the children to safety. At this point, the courageous Sangat realized that Darbar Sahib was surrounded by the large Indian army. Do you think these Singhs and Kaurs were afraid? No. The strong Sikhs defended their Darbar Sahib while reciting Nam Simran and never letting go of their love for the Guru.
Where did I get that book?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Let's start writing.
Just keep going with it. Keep going with it. That's great. That is awesome. All right, we'll wrap it up with our singers. So this was to come up with a short lullaby about the events of '84 for target audience of ages 5 to 8. All right.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Down, bullets flying, don't cry, keep smiling. We're in Chardi Kala, 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 Chardi Kala. Red water fish swimming, soldiers they are winning, but we're not scared. We're in Chardi Kala. Stand up tall and show their God. Sikh jooj de, fauji kam de. 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 We're in Chardi Kala, Chardi Kala.
ਖੁਸ਼ੀਆਂ ਦੇ ਜਗਾਰ ਕੇ ਜਾਵੇ ਫਤਿਹ ਭਾਵੇ ਨੇ ਹਾਲ ਹੋ ਜਾਵੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਗ੍ਰੰਥ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਜੀ ਦੇ ਮਨ ਨੂੰ ਭਾਵੇ ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ।
ਚੁੱਪ ਕਰਕੇ ਸੌ ਜਾਓ।
That's something stuck in my eye. That was very good. That was awesome. Awesome.
I think the project worked. It was good.
Yes, I mean, I really hope that this is something that you can think about or expand on what you've just built here. And if you don't want to expand on it, give it to me. And we'll figure something out on continuing your idea elsewhere. Because I think what you just created here was pretty amazing.
In just like 30 minutes. Like
Yes.
it's amazing when you think about it. Like that's how a story is written or a song is written, and we talk about it all the time that we should be doing something. And in really 30 minutes of us barely really having any resources around us, how creative our Sangat and community is. Like that is what is so inspirational.
Police on the high.
idea of marketing, this idea of rebranding 1984. I was thinking about something as we were driving up from Maryland about how powerful branding is really. I mean, we were driving along and I was getting a little tired, and we passed a lot of like coffee shops. I wasn't familiar with any of them. And then I saw this, and I said, oh, now I know this is where I need to stop. Because I know this brand. You know, by this brand, I know exactly what my experience is going to be. I know that I'm going to walk in, I'm going to see the same thing I've seen, even though I've never been to this part of Ohio before, but I'm going to walk in, I'm going to smell this certain smell of Starbucks, I'm going to order my crazy order the way I do it, they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, and they're going to call my name, I'm going to get it, walk right. I knew exactly how this experience is. I know how to process this. I know how to react to this. I know how to integrate with this. I know how the experience is going to be. And I know what emotions and feelings it brings from, just from the brand itself. And so, I'm not trying to make any comparisons here, but just pointing out the idea of how powerful a brand can be. And I thought to myself, what is that brand? What is that brand that we want to convey about 1984? And I was reminded about this movie. Old movie. Has anybody ever heard of this? Line on the desk. That's way more people than I put to my family. So, okay. So it's on YouTube. It's a good movie. It's about a mom with daughter who is it was the Italian it was Libyan resistance against the Italian invasion. And this Anthony Quinn played this movie. It's probably the late 70s, early 80s. But what's beautiful about the story is about these Bedouins, this ragtag army who's fighting against the Italian resistance. So this small sort of put together army against group of soldiers against this huge army. But there's this scene in the movie, and in this scene, basically there was this battle, and so all the soldiers go back to the desert to their tents, and all the wives and the children are just embracing their fathers as they come back from the battle. But one wife and child keeps looking and their father doesn't come. And Omar who is the sort of leader of the group of the resistance, you see him bringing the riderless horse back. And he gives them, the mother and son, a small book that the man had on him before he was killed in battle, and said, "This is yours." And she knew exactly what had taken place. And she starts crying. And he says in this piece of the story, and I was going to show it, but the connection wasn't that good, so I'm just going to quote it. What he says to her, he says, "Don't let him see you crying," referring to the son. "Don't let him see you crying too much. One day they will carry on the fight. Children should remember us as strong and confident, never broken." When I think of 1984, those are just at least today, these last few weeks of putting this together and thinking about this workshop, those are the words that come to mind. That you can try to attack us, and some of us may perish, but you will never destroy our faith. You will never break us. That to me is the brand of 1984 that I'm thinking about these days. It's what I hope I can convey to you. It's what we try to convey to our children. And I hope this idea is something that can give a new sense of vigor to the next generation that's coming, and how we present it and how we can take inspiration from these events. So with that,